we're talking about 2025 prospect debuts. So not 2024 prospect debuts, but 2025. So these are guys that are not likely to be promoted this year, but you never know how quickly guys get moved up. We've got Bret and we've got Chris joining us. And would you guys like to introduce yourselves? Bret?
Sure. I'm Bret Sayre. I am the president and CEO of Baseball Prospectus and founder of the Dynasty Guru. That's about me in 5 seconds.
Chris.
And I'm Chris, and I founded Baseball Pods, and I have baseball-pods.com, and I just basically sit on Twitter and listen to other people's podcasts, but and summarize and promote the work of individual and independent podcasts. And then I also do a little dynasty work and research, and have my own dynasty rankings that I publish. So I'm honored to be in this august company.
Well, my name's Chris Blessing.
Good
Baseball
name.
HQ. I do prospect stuff. Check us out. New website coming soon. So let's get started. We decided, and actually this was a great idea by Bret, to separate these guys. We're going to come up with 3 infield / catchers, 2 outfielders, and 2 pitchers each. So just quickly going to, we'll go to Chris first. Let's just go ahead and run down the 3 infielders you've selected, or catchers.
I got Samuel Basallo, who is a catcher now, and will probably still be an infielder no matter what he does, or a utility player. Xavier Isaac and Colt Emerson.
All right. You want to start with the catcher, Basallo?
Yeah. So, and we'll just talking for a couple minutes on this. I mean, obviously, he there's no doubting the power with this guy. The batting eye that he's shown has been remarkable. For me, he's like my 23rd current prospect. I have him actually above Ethan Salas in the fantasy world. Part of that's because when I do dynasty rankings, I do the next 3 years. And he's my number 2 prospect overall for who I think will debut in 2025. So the real question with him is, where is he going to play with Rutschman in Baltimore? I feel like with what his bat has shown, Baltimore has to do something to unstick this logjam. I feel like the players that are more likely to move would be along the lines of Connor Norby, Joey Ortiz, or some of their depth of middle infield. And ultimately, that'll open up either a DH slot, some catching or first base opportunities for Basallo if he hits the way I think he will this year in the minors.
Do you have any thoughts on Basallo, Bret?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the bat. I think his future is really kind of dependent on Baltimore's tolerance and possibly what happens at the major league level with the strike zone. But I think he's certainly capable of catching at the major league level. But he's one of those guys. It's not a great comp for what he is, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Carlos Delgado was a minor league catcher, yep. And he ended up being a way better hitter in the majors, not being a catcher, than if he would have been. And that's, if that's the path for Basallo and he ends up not catching all that much, I just think there's a ton of upside in that bat. If he's a first baseman, even VDH is most of the time, like he's the kind of guy who you want to stick in the middle of your lineup and just forget about it for a while.
I selected one of my guys was Moises Ballesteros, is another catcher who probably doesn't stick there. Not as much power potential, very good eye, good hit tool. However, he's 5'7", and so like a first base type little deal does not really work with the Ballesteros in that sort of sense. And actually, when you wrote down when you shared your guys, I shared him specifically because really and truly, there's a difference between somebody like Ballesteros who will not play anything but DH most likely, and a kid like Basallo. Let's go with your second guy, who's actually my favorite guy on your list. Is Xavier Isaac, Chris.
So, I don't really have a type, but you would think so from these first two picks, because another massive power, just high exit velocity, launches the ball. Doesn't chase too much, as far as I'm concerned. I think he's my top prospect for 2025, number 22 on my overall list of prospects. I don't know what you guys think. The only hole I see is lefties potentially for him, and the fact that he's on the Rays, and anytime they smell a split, they sure like to dive in on it. So that's my take on Xavier Isaac. Just massive power and a fun guy to watch swing.
Yeah.
And Bret, what are your thoughts about Isaac?
I mean, the most impressive thing about him is just his contact ability coming in as kind of a really lowly heralded prep prospect, at least for where he was taken on day one of the draft. He had big power, and I just absolutely was not expecting him to come out and hit the way he did. It really bodes well for his future and what his upside is, because the power and the exit velocity, all that stuff is going to be there. But yeah, he looks like the whole package right now, at least at first base.
He really does. I got to give James Anderson credit for I had similar skepticism, Bret, when he was first coming out, and just listening to James describe him and what he believed in him is what eventually. I wasn't certainly early on him at all, but I was able to get a couple of shares in some leagues because I was like, well, James knows what he's talking about, so I'll take a couple shots. So
it's hard to go wrong listening to James on things.
Exactly.
Yeah. On my end with Isaac was, to see his body development over the last offseason. That was a huge development. He looked like a kid coming out of the draft that was very pudgy. And most of the time, and I know that we're supposed to project bodies and that sort of thing, but most of those types tend to back up. They don't tend to take that next step, shed the weight, become a lean, muscular power hitter, as opposed to a doughy, slowish type, whatever you want to call it. So,
sounds like me.
Yeah, I mean that's what most guys like this actually go that direction. So kudos to the Rays organization again for finding another prospect this way. Your last guy is Colt Emerson. What are your thoughts on him?
I mean, he's really kind of rocketed up the ranks since draft day. I think probably the biggest riser. I mean, I've seen him I think he was 17 when he was drafted, so he was a little bit young, and reportedly wherever I see is he's put on muscle. And I think he could make a case for him to be a top 5 or 6 FYPD pick in those drafts. The question is the power, right? Because he can sure as hell hit. And I think that you look at those exit velocities, you look at some of the hard contact that he makes, and I think there's power in there to dream on, which would make him a 5-tool player.
Yeah, I look at him I don't know. Even with the size, I think at the velocity he's hitting the baseball, at least on the scouted video looks that I've seen. I don't have data for that organization, so I can't really dive deep into that. But just from the video that I saw both at the showcase circuit and then what he did at Modesto this year, I think power is going to come. It's probably average to above average, but with that sort of skill set, I mean, that's going to be enough to make him a regular player and possibly top 5 at that position, top 10 at that position in fantasy. Bret, any thoughts?
No, I totally agree. He's absolutely a top 10 pick in first year player drafts. And the fact that he was able to shoot up that high, especially with how top heavy and deep this class is, you had Yamamoto in there. I mean, we got him at 7. And I think that's, just the fact that he's able to get there is a testament to how strong he was in his debut. And I'm really excited to see what he does in 2024.
Yeah, same here. Chris, you were kind and you let Bret have Jet Williams, the shortstop from the Mets or center fielder for the Mets, depending who you ask. Bret, I love him. I'll just say that I love him, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
I absolutely adore Jet Williams. He is, Chris was joking around about having a type, and I am long known to have a type here where I do not discriminate against short hitters, and Jet is 5'6" or 5'7", depending on the day. But he is so strong for his size, and he's the kind of guy. I mean, we talk about. I'm not saying that he is Mookie Betts. I'm not. But part of the reason why Mookie Betts is able to hit for the power he does, and is able to have kind of the game of someone larger in frame, is because of how quick and strong his wrists are. And Jet Williams brings that to the table. And he's not going to be the kind of guy who is going to hit, 30, 35 home runs. But for a guy who's sub 5'8" to be able to put up, to put up power numbers in game like he's been doing just in his debut at his levels, I think it's very realistic for him to be able to get to 15, 20 homers eventually. And that turns that profile completely on his head, because he is capable of hitting for average. His plate discipline is off the charts for his age. He can be, if he can solve being slightly passive without losing the aggressiveness on stuff in the zone, he is going to be one of the better hitters in baseball when he hits his peak. And he's capable of stealing 40 to 50 bases. I absolutely love the profile. I think if he were 6'2", I think he'd be I might have been the number one pick in the draft. There's a ton of upside and skill there. And I love watching him play. I'm going to watch a lot of those games just to see him.
Chris, any thoughts to add?
I mean, he's my number 17 overall prospect right now, and I could see going higher. I'm in love with him too, not as much as Bret, but close. I love the combination of batting eye and speed. Like in an OBP league, if you play in an OBP dynasty league, this guy is like gold. I mean, it's going to be just so fun because he's going to rack up walks. I do think he's going to hit for a good average. Well, he'll get enough combined with the batting average. His OBP is going to be extremely high, and he's going to steal a ton of bases. I play in a league that's like walks, doubles, and triples, home runs, batting average, and net steals, and I feel like he's going to be like a $50 player in that league someday.
Yeah.
So love him.
Yeah, I'm right there too. Swing percentage this last year was under 35%. Major leagues, you're looking at guys that are, considered to have good patience or solid patience at about 45%, 46% swing rate, and doesn't chase under 20%. So this is a guy that already has a good sense of the zone. Went up 3 levels last year and brought these. Even though the competition got harder, he did bring these skills to each level. Even if the statistics might have been better or worse, they were seen everywhere. Next guy on your list, Bret, is a guy that I got to see bunch last year, Carson Williams. What is your thoughts on Williams?
Yeah, Williams is in some ways the opposite of Jet Williams, and he is just he's the guy with the fun tool grades, and I think there is going to be enough hit there for him to get the most of it. There's a lot of pop in that bat. I think he can get to 30 home runs. He's got a little bit of speed to match too. The question is can he ultimately hit like 250? And the thing that I always try to remind myself with prospects like Williams, and when I say prospect like Williams, I say guys who are really strong on the defensive side from a scouting perspective. Williams is absolutely a shortstop. He will play there in the majors. And it's guys like that who can break their way into the majors partially with their defense that will get enough rope at the major league level to maximize their offensive ability. And maybe Carson Williams will be a 210, 220 hitter when he gets to the majors. But the ceiling is definitely there for him to be a 250, 30, maybe even 15 or so steal guy. I don't think he's going to be a super heavy stolen base guy, but he's a fun he's a fun prospect. He's really fun to watch with the glove. He's got a super strong arm, and I think Tampa is going to, Tampa is going to need a shortstop of the future now. So I think he's going to be that guy.
I got to see him both in I think high A. I might have seen him in. Did he get to double A? I'm not sure. It all blurs. I know I saw him in Arizona as well.
He got to triple A.
Yeah,
he did. Yeah, he got to AAA, but that was mostly because they needed a body up there. That wasn't any indicative. I know that some analysts were kind of pushed that ahead his timeline. The one thing, and just looking at the stats real quick, his swing and miss against fastballs below 20%. Most of his issues with the swing and miss with whiffs are with breaking pitches. That tends to be the last thing to really kind of develop. I think people are being a little bit hard on the hit tool right now. I understand why. Chris, I'm gonna throw out the most popular comp for him and tell me if you agree or not. Heard this a lot at First Pitch Arizona. Dansby Swanson. Do you think that this is potentially a poor man's Dansby Swanson?
Yeah, I do. I think actually I'm actually a little higher on his speed potentially than Bret is. I mean, with given the new rules, I think he's an above average runner. So I think 10 to 15 steals on a team that runs smart like Tampa does, I can see that. For me, it's just about, can he cut down that strikeout percentage to make it manageable? I mean, that's the big question for me. I'm not as high on him as some others are, but part of that's also because and maybe this is changing a little bit in Tampa, but I always discount Rays prospects unless there's like a super clear pathway, like I think there is for Xavier Isaac, for example, just because they split time so much and platoon so much. You have to be a really good hitter to get that every day, get the at-bats that you want for a full-time shortstop. So I think Dansby's an interesting comp, not as handsome, doesn't have as good hair, but as Dansby does, but that's no slouch. None of us do.
It's tough.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is very tough. Your final guy, Bret, for the infield position is Tommy Troy, a guy that, speaking to scouts, speaking to guys that covered the Arizona Diamondbacks, actually had him as their number 2 prospect in a lot of cases over Drew Jones. So what are your thoughts about Tommy Troy?
Yeah, I mean, our prospecting VP had him at 2 in the Diamondback system too. I think that, I kind of going back to what we were talking about before, this is, we've got Troy over, we've got Cole Emerson over Troy in first year player drafts. And that is, put a little bit more context around how high Cole Emerson has jumped. Tommy Troy is a very good prospect and a very good hitting prospect. He's just a lift and pull dude, and he's going to fit in nicely in Arizona. He's not going to be a fantasy first rounder or second rounder, but I think he's going to be a very solid third baseman for a while. He's right around 50 overall on our dynasty list, and I think he'll move quickly. I think not quite quickly enough to move him out of the conversation that we're having now, but I don't think it's impossible that he could reach the majors in the second half of 2024, given his experience. He's he was great at Stanford, and he's got wood bat experience. He was not, he wasn't doing Wyatt Langford things when he debuted, but nobody but Wyatt Langford does Wyatt Langford things. He's also not a guy who's super tall either. So he's not a He's not 6'4", he's 5'10", but that's enough for him and for him to do what he does.
Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot. I had him and Matt Shaw, looked at them very seriously coming into the draft, or similarly, I should say, coming into the draft. I think the consensus is that Shaw has kind of separated himself a little bit from Troy, but I feel like Troy's become a little bit of a forgotten man. He's also, I mean, the speed is from third base in fantasy is just now, we've got Gunnar and Ellie coming in now. And so, maybe it'll be a little more common, but I think that's a lovely thing to think about, his speed at third base. Coming pretty quickly on a Diamondbacks team that's building this really strong core. So I think he's been a little bit forgotten with Emerson's rise, with Shaw's kind of separation, and moved into that first or second tier. I also have him. I have him 58th on my prospect. Drew Jones is at 80th. I don't think there's a Diamondback prospect, so it sounds like I got the same ranking as the rest of y'all. But yeah, I just think he's. I would be very happy to get him with a second half of the first round pick in FYPD.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything else for me to say on that one. I'm going to go head over to my guys. I'm going to just do this really quickly. I picked last, so I didn't really get the best choices here. But I got guys that I think are maybe a bit undervalued. For at least the first two. Braden Taylor's a guy that got picked by the Rays, first round pick last year, out of TCU, had a huge power gain, continued that power gain into the pros, but his hit tool kind of bottomed out because some breaking ball issues. Breaking balls get better once you get to the pros, even on the lower levels now. So like that's a life that he had to live. And I'm still fairly like, I'll be honest. I rated him higher in at the draft than the other guys that kind of got picked around him, like Troy, like Emerson and stuff. I think that his pro debuts kind of put him a little bit behind the 8 ball of those guys. However, I still think that there's some worth there. I think that he has a good foundational hit tool, and the power. I believe the power's obviously not going to be a 600 slug guy like he was in college, but I feel like he could, potentially hit 25, 30 home runs. Position wise, there's I know Baseball Reference has him third base, second base. He's played mostly third base throughout his career. I think he ends up actually at second. Just kind of spitballing from scouting reports of his defense, because that's the one thing that we really can't value off of video. Chris, any thoughts?
And not necessarily my favorite guy, just given some of the warts that you highlighted in his game, but certainly someone he's within my top 100, and I think if things break right and he figures that out, I think he'll play every day in Tampa. But no, I like him, but not quite as much as you do.
And Bret?
Yeah, I think I think if you. Yeah, there are some similarities there between him and Troy. I think there's less speed.
Mm-hmm.
Did we lose him?
I think Bret got frozen.
He's certain guy.
There he is.
Yep.
Did I get frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen in time.
All right, hold on.
Who would have thought that Braden Taylor would break us?
Yes, broke the internet.
It's my fault.
I think I might be back.
Yeah, you're there.
You're in and out. I might go off video for a minute.
Right.
If that works.
Yeah. I think my Braden Taylor thoughts are lost in the ether now.
It's okay. I threw out a guy that I
still donate to PitchCon though. Don't let that stop.
Yeah, donate to PitchCon. You're also here to learn about some guys that might not be talked about other places, so that's good. Like Moises Ballesteros. I know I already kind of mentioned him. Anybody have any thoughts about him? So we can move on. Before we move on, I should say.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with kind of his body type in terms of what happens to him if he's not a catcher. But I mean, we've seen, again, I do not discriminate on height. We've seen plenty of hitters that can make the most of it, even that are even that are well sub 6 foot. It's going to be hard for him to carve a path. I don't think he's the kind of person who you can kind of throw out in left field unless you're really not trying to win baseball games.
Yeah, given his lack of, he's a plotter, so you're not putting him in the outfield. But he does have a really good batting eye, and you can see like if that continues, I think someone's going to find a place for him, and that could be some version of catcher, first base, DH. Even now he's too short for first base, I guess, but maybe it's just catcher, DH. But he's an incredible potential if he can find that defensive home. So I like him. Great name too. 80 grade name.
It is. And my final guy is a guy that I got to see at the end of the year, Edwin Arroyo, who's a defensively minded shortstop would be what I would put it. He's also a switch hitter who's also put up some decent counting stats, especially in stolen bases and stuff. I got probably about a 2-week look. Very lean body. There's room to grow. I think he was viewed better last offseason, yep, where maybe some of the tools were, performance plus the tools were a little bit extravagant. Whatever. I can't talk now. But anyway, I like the bat from the left side. It's a funky stance. I don't know if it works from the right side, but that's where I believe his power would come from. My thinking on here is a solid prospect. The glove's going to play. The glove's going to be what gets him in the big leagues. But is he going to necessarily have the counting stats? He'll probably steal, double-digit steals. But I also saw a guy that with his instincts that wasn't really that great. Reading pitchers and that sort of thing. But then again, it was Double-A, and you just never know, that step up, of course, from High A gets some guys. Either of you have any thoughts on Arroyo?
Yeah, I really like Arroyo at this time last year. And, the what you were looking at then, because he was so young, you're looking at kind of the start of the performance plus the tools plus the age. And this is kind of the thing that happens when the next year is not as impressive on the field as the prior year was. But yeah, I think he's certainly a major league shortstop, and I think there's enough there. There's a million infielders in Cincinnati, but if he were to end up playing shortstop in Cincinnati, you've got a really advantageous home park there that will kind of help some of that power play up a touch. But yeah, who knows what happens with that whole infield situation, because they're crowded now and they have guys coming, so it's going to get weird.
Chris? Yeah, similarly, I actually added him a lot last year, and he's been a sell for me this offseason in Dynasty in terms of just the shine wore off a little bit. I do think he'll play every day. He'll be an everyday player. Probably not in Cincinnati. Once again, another team that needs to do something. Baltimore and Cincy, I just like both of them need arms, and both of them have all these bats. And I'm just wondering why there haven't been moves that have been made. But he's an everyday future player. So if you play in a deep league, definitely don't abandon ship. But for me, I was able to get pretty good, probably 80 cents on the dollar for what I paid last year. And so that's what I did this offseason with him. He's just, the shine's worn off a little bit.
Well, this is a perfect chance to go over to the outfield position. Bret, we'll start with yours since we started with Chris's infielders. Roman Anthony was the first guy you have listed down here, a guy that really popped up last year. What are your impressions of Anthony?
I mean, you cannot. I guess let's start with what happened last year, because Anthony was a little bit of a weird scenario in that he was not dominating in low A, and was in low A as he started there as an 18-year-old. And after about what, like 7, 8 weeks in Salem, they brought him up to high A, and he just absolutely exploded. Now, Salem is a garbage place to hit, just truly garbage place to hit. But just continued rolling all the way up through Portland. I mean, he doesn't turn 20 until like 6 weeks into the minor league season in 2024, which is bananas. I think if he were in a different organization, I wouldn't have thrown him on this list at all, because I think there's a realistic shot he could have debuted in the second half of 2024. I don't think the Red Sox are going to have any reason to do that, and I don't think they're going to. I think they'll let him play at AA for probably the first half of the season, and maybe he'll get some time at AAA in the second half, and they'll be ready to go in 2025. He's the total package. I think he'll hit for average. I think he'll hit for power. He can run. He can fake it in center field. He's probably a corner outfielder, but he's a lot of fun to watch. You don't love a lefty in Fenway Park, but maybe it tamps down his power slightly. But you're talking about a guy who's a 5-category contributor, who is capable of being a borderline first-round fantasy pick at peak.
Chris?
Yeah, not much to add to that. 5 tools all across the board, 5 grades above average. He's where is he? He's probably like number 14 or 15 on my list of top prospects. The only reason I was interested to hear what Bret said about, because I thought he might be able to come up in this as soon as like mid-season this year. But that does make more sense thinking about the organizational context to put him on this list for 2025. But he has the talent to still be able to crack that, depending on how things shake out in Fenway.
He could 100% force his way up there and make the Red Sox look really stupid for keeping him down. But
yeah.
He seemed to be immune to public pressure these days, I guess, up in Boston.
And you never know also with the change in baseball operations group with Breslow taking over. I mean, it could be a completely different ship this year. But like, I didn't really feel like he'd be up in the big leagues this year or this coming year anyway. But you never know. He could force his way up there. Your second guy's prospect that I've done a lot of research work on through the years, and it's Emmanuel Rodriguez of the Twins. The guy is one of the most patient hitters you'll come to find. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's 100% right. And he is, you talk about what patience to a fault can mean. And, you get a little bit of that with Rodriguez, but he is just he is a walk-in homer machine when he is on. He's just, his approach and his plate discipline is very strong. His pitch identification is very strong. And it's just such a weird profile, because you don't see this that much anymore. Someone who is really, and he kind of splits the line between being kind of interesting in average leagues and being a potential force of nature in OBP leagues. He's probably, I'd say there might be as big as a 20 to 25 point shift in his value just on that one category, because I don't think his batting average ultimately ends up being super helpful at the major league level, but he is someone who is capable of pushing 400 on base percentage if he can continue on the path that he's going on. There's going to be a little bit of potentially a little bit of a backlog there in Minnesota, but he's going to need 2024 as a development year, because he's lost some development time over the last couple of years. But yeah, I have him on a ton of teams. I'm a big fan.
I did an article this year in the Minor League Baseball Analyst 2024. You can order it. It's probably in the mail for anybody that's ordered it. Where I was looking at the strike zone in the Florida State League, and now I started out last year thinking that his patience was a product of the automated strike zone. I was wrong. I'll be honest. I mean, sometimes you can be wrong about stuff, right? The thing that we don't have many 3 true outcome hitters anymore. This guy is a 3 true outcome hitter. I mean, he's gonna either walk, strike out, or hit a home run. So, I've always had a hard time placing him. Baseball HQ, we don't do really specific lists for different formats or anything like that. So like we do this list for the 5x5 format, and it's just so hard to kind of place a guy like him on that list any higher than the midway point. I'm waiting for his debut. I hope it's in 2024, just so I don't have to rank him anymore. Chris, what are your thoughts?
You kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was saying he is a 3 true outcome hitter, and you don't see much of them anymore. And he doesn't look like it. Like he's not Adam Dunn. He's 5'10" maybe. It's like when I think of 3 true outcome hitters, I think of Joey Gallo and Adam Dunn, these big hulking sluggers that just wait on their pitch and then mash or miss. But he also, he's an interesting player also because, he's got at least league average speed and, also something uncommon for those guys. So I think he's a fascinating guy. And I think what Bret said is right. OBP league, bump him up more than he probably is ranked on almost any prospect list that's public.
Well, I'll move on to my first outfielder, and that's Justin Crawford. Outfielder for the Phillies, son of Carl Crawford. A guy that when we talk launch angle, we use words like negative launch angle, that sort of thing. Although he did improve as the season went on, I did do some video scouting of him, good feeds in the Florida State League early this year, as Bradenton and St. Lucie, and did some video scouting, some of that league. And I don't think I saw him hit the ball hard in the air, but like literally I got like the little portion of time where he actually was trying to hit the ball in the air. It was kind of crazy, but anyway, it's a lot of speed and he hits the ball very, very hard. It might be on the ground. It might be low line drive. For our book, for our organizational report, Bret Hershey, who's the GM, our editor, my boss, had a really good line in his report about hopefully those ground balls turn into line drives. And as a Phillies fan, I'm sure Bret is praying for that as we speak. But just a very, very talented guy. He's not Carl Crawford to me, if that makes sense. He's like his own player. Chris, what are your thoughts on Carl? I almost said Carl. Oh my God. On Crawford.
Well, he's fast. Got that. I'm not a big. I just don't. He seems to me like he's going to be. I'm worried about just being able to make enough hard contact to put up the batting average that I'm going to want with his lack of power, if that makes sense. At the big league level, that's I'm not he'll play. He's obviously one of their top 10 prospects in the system. He's gonna make it up there, but he's not the type of player I generally, for fantasy anyway, that I tend to flock towards.
And Bret?
Coming out of the draft, he was one of the guys who I was really trying to avoid, mostly because I think there was some kind of inherent bias going on there because he's Carl Crawford's son. And it's easy to kind of assume and kind of lazy analysis your way up there. But honestly, I think I was too low on him. It's not my favorite profile. and I don't ultimately think he's going to be a super high fantasy contributor. But I think that, I think I was a little the hate went a little too far from my side there in the draft.
All right, my last guy, last outfielder is Chase DeLauder, Cleveland Guardians outfielder, dude that I saw this year in the Arizona Fall League. Very unorthodox swing, something that, as my scouty eye, was kind of crazy seeing firsthand. A lot of contacts in the Guardians organization. They absolutely love him, specifically because he's not like any other player that they have in their system. He's not a middle infielder. I mean, that's pretty much what they have, right? I'm going to catch hell for that if any of them are listening right now. But anyway, he is not a middle infielder. I really think that he could be a 5-category contributor in 5x5 formats. Even though the swing isn't pretty, it kind of reminds me, and I know it's a different looking swing, but it reminds me of Bellinger when Bellinger was coming up, and a lot of the scouts that I talked to were like, I don't know if this is going to work. It might not work. It might not work, and we've seen it beside the little 2-year struggle of Bellinger. We've seen it work. Guys that are capable, regardless of what their swings look like, tend to do well. Bret, what are your thoughts on DeLauder?
I'd love to say that I left him for you out of benevolence, but I actually think he will get to the majors in 2024. I am a huge fan of DeLauder. I think he's not for the faint of heart, and he's not for people who can't get by kind of things that look just a little bit off. But the guy who has always come to mind for me when I think of DeLauder, and not from like a purely physical standpoint, but more from like a development standpoint, is George Springer. As a guy who was not at the highest level college program, was definitely more of a raw, longer development cycle kind of guy coming out of the draft, but fully capable of contributing everywhere, being a 5-category guy. It worked out about as well as I think anyone could have expected for Springer. And I think, there's slightly less pop in there, I think, for DeLauder, but it's a similar thing where, he is going to have more development in the minors than a more seasoned college hitter would, because he's, that he was not at a super major program. But the Guardians do a great job of getting these guys through the system. And I think they'll run them out there sooner rather than later, and we'll all get to see what that looks like at the major league level, which is exciting.
Chris?
Springer is an interesting. Was Springer UConn? Is that where he went? Yeah. It's an interesting comp. I hadn't thought of that one before. I mean, I'll just be the third person that loves Chase DeLauder. He's delicious. He's gonna. Eric Cross has been. He's over at FGN now. Was a big early proponent of his, and I think earlier today I heard him, or yesterday, say if one more person said something about the hitch in his swing or his awkward swing, it's working. And I think sometimes in baseball we get used. There's a certain, just like you were talking about earlier about the bias against short players, Bret. I think there's biases in certain swings, and that comes from a good place. Obviously, there's probably better ways to do things, but if Julio Franco and Hunter Pence can be major league offensive contributors, I don't see no reason why Chase DeLauder can't be. And I agree. I'm actually have picked him late in a couple of deep draft and hold best ball leagues at the hope that he'll come up for the last month or so this season and contribute.
I picked him for 2024 because he's there's one skill he hasn't really shown capable of, and that's staying healthy. This is a kid that was drafted. Just can't stay healthy. And that was a college thing too, had this issue too. So hopefully DeLauder can stay healthy. I'm really high on him and hope that he's up here this year, actually, because I do have a few shares. Chris, your two outfielders. Let's start with Spencer Jones.
I mean, this guy is just a ridiculous human being. Human beings just shouldn't. He defies the laws of physical nature. It feels like. I think one of the things that I saw was, I saw it in a few places. I know Chris Clegg has mentioned it. Is I think his 0 to second time at Double-A was 11 seconds, and the fastest time ever that they recorded was Corbin Carroll at 10.75 seconds. And Spencer Jones is 6'6", right? So, I mean, 43 stolen bases for someone of that size goes to show you what kind of an athlete he is. And he also just has tremendous power. So the question is, will the hit, will he hit? Will he hit enough to be? I mean, he has the upside to be, for me, the tools to be a first-round fantasy player, but he needs to obviously do better with ground balls. That would be ideal. And if he stays healthy and puts it all together, you could be looking at, like I said, a first rounder. If he doesn't, I still think he's going to be a low to mid average guy that gets you power and speed. There's also, I should say, a floor that is very low here that is probably not major league regular.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we talk about the bias against short hitters. There's also a bias against very tall hitters, and not all of them make it work. But if you have a tall hitter, you want him to do the things that Spencer Jones does.
Yeah, I agree. I know that there's a few Yankee fans that kind of got on me. I wrote them up early in the year this year. They're seeing like left-handed Aaron Judge. He's not Aaron Judge. I'm sorry, guys. But like nobody else is really. Staying on the whole Vanderbilt alumni bias that apparently Chris has. We're going to go to another outfielder, Enrique Bradfield Jr. What are your thoughts on Bradfield Jr.?
Well, he's already ready to play baseball in the major leagues today, at least on defense, like with no question, right? And he's a true 80 grade runner. So he's going to play. He also is one of the few positions on the diamond where the Orioles don't have 100 people trying to play that are under the age of 25. They've got Cedric Mullins, who's probably, seems like he's on the back end of his career, and which is great. He had a wonderful career. Love Cedric. But so he's got a pretty clear pathway to be there. How much for me, I think that everyday playing time is underrated in fantasy. I don't think he's going to be he has an upside to be an excellent hitter. I don't think he likely will be, but I think he's going to play every day. And, 650 plate appearances a year with massive amount of steals and good counting stats and a passable batting average is what I see as his probable outcome.
I mean, we're talking about old school type center field, probably first baseman or leadoff type guy. I mean, we haven't seen one of these guys come up in such a long time. I'm so excited because it will allow some other guys to get some play as well with that similar type profile. Bret, what are your thoughts on Bradfield?
He's a really fun guy to watch. And I think I mentioned it a little bit when we were talking about Edwin Arroyo, but it really applies to Bradfield, maybe more than any other prospect in the minors, which is that he is going to get a lot of play in center field, and he will get a lot of at-bats to figure out whether he can hit at the major league level. Because if he gets there, if he's just an average hitter, the combination of his speed and his defense is going to make him an extraordinarily valuable player, and Baltimore knows that. So they're gonna give him as much run as possible, and he's I don't doubt what he can do with enough reps.
Yeah, well said, guys. We're gonna just quickly go through our pitchers. We each have two pitchers. Won't ask for any feedback from anybody else, but if you guys wanted to provide feedback, go ahead. My first pitcher was Braves prospect J.R. Ritchie, who's out right now after Tommy John surgery. This is a kid that everybody was really, really, really high on when he was pitching early in the year. Usually when the Braves organization contacts are getting excited about a guy, usually then they explode about 2 weeks later, or two months later, like onto the scene. We saw it with Smith Schwarber a few years ago. This was their guy last year, and then he got hurt. So, trusting my Braves contacts, they've been right more times than they've been not. So I included him, and then of course the big lefty with the White Sox organization, Noah Schultz, was limited on a pitch count last year in low A. He's a guy I'm looking really forward to seeing either at Winston-Salem or later in the year in Birmingham. Just electric stuff. Seems to, from a very low 3/4 slot, it's devastating. I hate throwing comps out, but given his height and his wiriness, there's a little bit, and the slot, there's a little bit of Randy Johnson there too. I hate doing that. That's really sad to do to a kid. Chris, how about your two pitchers?
So I dug a little deeper on the pitchers, which is kind of how I draft in Dynasty anyway. My first one is River Ryan, who, was mostly an infielder for the Padres before the Dodgers got a hold of him a couple of years ago. And now I think there's a chance he'll pitch, later this year. He's got 3 pitches: fastball, curve, changeup, lots of movement, like up and down, sideways. Got up to AAA last year, and it was just announced today the Dodgers invited him to spring training. So he's not on the 40-man, I don't think, but he's got a chance this year. Second, division rivals and much preferred team, the San Francisco Giants, Hayden Birdsong. Just a big right-hand pitcher. I love watching him pitch. He controls the mound. I love the way he walks off the mound. He's just got a ton of confidence. He's got I guess you call it a 12-6 curveball. It's not like a Bugs Bunny Barry Zito, but because he doesn't tend to start as high. But he's got a nice curveball. Did well at A, but at AA he struggled with walks, and to me that's going to be the question. If he's got a great ballpark to come up in, if he makes it, but if he can keep those walks in check, I think he's like a number 3 starter in baseball. But he also has the downside to fall off because he walked over 5 per 9, I think, at AA.
Good, very good, very good. Bret, your two guys.
So my first guy is Robbie Snelling, the Padres. He may have had the most kind of surprisingly impressive full season debut in 2023 of anyone from that draft class. He made it all the way up to AA and just was successful at every stop. He's kind of continued his velocity jump that he saw right before the draft. He can regularly touch 94, 95 from the left side. The slider looks really good. He needs more development, but it looks good. The changeup might get there, but it's going to need to get there if he's going to be a really reliable fantasy starter. But he's athletic, he's repeatable. He is, he's not going to be a enormous strikeout guy, but I think he ends up being a very solid, possibly number 3 fantasy starter, a guy who you can just kind of plug in and forget about for a while. The other guy I picked is a little higher upside, a little more kind of standard development cycle. This is Bubba Chandler of the Pirates. He looks like a football player because he was a football player. There's a lot of crossover between pitchers and quarterbacks, and he kind of continues that thread going forward. Certainly not the same kind of stat lines as Snelling as he moved through, and the command is a work in progress. But the fastball is really strong, and the changeup and slider have potential. So he is more of a longer term development play. But Pirates are an interesting organization. There's not a ton that's going to hold him back from throwing in the majors when he's ready. So he's kind of kind of a fun guy.
Yeah, I got to see Bubba this year and throw 72% strikes. And, you expect a guy, when you go scout some guy, and that's why you have to research and have to look at him more in depth, seeing a 72% strike rate when you know that he doesn't have that skill yet. He was by far the most dynamic pitcher I saw all year. If he can put it together, that would be great. All right, it's 5:57 in the PM on the Eastern Standard, and we did it. We got through this, and Nick didn't even have to come in to basically tell us, "Hey, get out," and we didn't have to sing either. We didn't have to sing. We didn't have to, for those who missed the last one, Michael Govier was singing like only he could prior to this. Any last words, guys? Bret?
No, this is fun to do with you guys. I mean, we playing in a bunch of dynasty leagues, we get to cross paths sometimes, but it's fun to get to actually sit down and talk for a bit about prospects we like. This is why we do this. This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I learned a lot. Always do listening to you guys. I'm a big fan, and just a great conversation about prospects is one that I'm never going to turn away from. So I would just say I think some of these guys we did talk about. I bet the over under is probably 4. Well, 3 is where I'm going to put it. Will debut in 2024. So don't hold us to it.
Yeah, hopefully nobody comes with pitchforks to pitch list next year to PitchCon.